ahead and do it. I asked you to use your video and it said Luke will use his video later, is what it said back to me. I don't know why. It's weird. Anyway, oh wait, something's going on. I don't know what this is. Now, what's happening? Oh, there we go. Got video. You're on here twice. I don't know what's going on.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, I can see you now. Yeah. Yeah, I sent a link to Abigail too, just in case she's free. But so what have you been up to, Luke?
There we go.
Nice.
Oh my gosh. Dude, I don't know how to do this. Life is just crazy right now. Oh, it's good, man. I'm outside. That's really nice. Being outdoors really helps all things.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, I've been I mean, did I tell you about how I left my job? Oh, there goes my dog.
Yeah,
Ember,
and
come here.
You kind of started your own business, sort of, right?
Yeah. And just kind of took a leap of faith in regards to that. And it's just been kind of a second guessing myself this whole time ever since leaving my employer. But at the same time, I'm making progress towards the end goal. And like I kind of put off all the jobs that I had. Like the phone was ringing off the hook, but I just needed like a break. So I did that, and then now it's like kind of like putting the pedal all the way down to the floor, and just like I went and saw 3 estimates the other night, and like 3 jobs. And there's just like, it just seems like chaos right now. And then my truck broke down today, and it's just like, what's happening? But it's all good.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a crazy day.
It's been what do they call it, like first world problems? You know, it's like life could be a lot simpler perhaps in someplace else, and sometimes you envy like I don't even know, man. I just remember being in like Africa, and it was like there was this weird thing where like their life was so disconnected with the modern world in the little village that I was in, and I like envied that, even despite all the inconveniences that they had in their daily life. But it was like and they envied me being being able to have all these access to all these things. And I don't know, it's just a weird juxtaposition. But yeah,
I totally understand. How long were you in Africa? I didn't even know you were there.
Oh, just a short time. I went there for, it was about a month in my junior year of college. I was taking a globalization and localization course in philosophy, and that was it. There was a small or like a farm that we started in a village, and like on the border of Mozambique and South Africa. And so we're right there. And yeah, it was an interesting time.
Is this a Heidi Baker thing?
Say that again?
Do you know Heidi Baker? Is this one of those things? She's
do
you know who I'm talking about?
I feel like revival teacher.
Yeah, something like that. I think she does a lot in Mozambique, so that's why I wasn't sure, because I know you had mentioned before that you had gotten involved with when we were talking about the prophecy and stuff, that you'd gotten involved with different more charismatic circles.
Yeah. I think the name strikes a chord with me, but I think that was even further beyond my reaches at that point.
Yeah, that's weird. That's like I think, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 You're probably the third person or maybe fourth person that's said that phrase first world problems to me today. It's kind of strange. It's weird.
Yeah, man, yeah. It seems like a weird thing because I guess it's so weird because we like paternalistically look at like third world countries and the way that they live and stuff like and that we're like you guys believe me, you don't want these problems we have in the modern Western in the highly developed Western world. Like there's even though it's like all these like super convenient. I'm getting fireworks and stuff, so I'm sorry. Maybe I should go inside.
I am getting them too.
But
It's your call, man. They don't. I mean, they don't sound that loud to me. But are you running?
yeah, man, there's mosquitoes out here.
Yeah. So what's been on your mind lately?
Oh, derealization and depersonalization. In fact, I heard Cal mention something about that, and at least I thought so. But maybe I don't remember the context of that whole bit. But sorry, guys, I'm chaotic.
No, I definitely know what that's like, Luke. I had a very severe form of that for at least 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Just brought up depersonalization, so just to catch you up.
Yeah, I don't know where to even begin on that. I think I've been thinking about it not in regards to like I've been trying to analyze what it is. It's more just like I've been thinking about it because I've been experiencing it a lot, and it's been you know how like your psychological and like can take on these different turns and twists. Like you might have experienced depression, but then it becomes anxiety, and then maybe at some point it becomes like something different for a while, like maybe even like all these weird categories we have with like the DSM-5 or whatever, and we try to like give ourselves these labels, but it's like I feel like I've just been like flopping through like, oh, I'll read something about this psychiatric disorder, and I'm like, yeah, I think I might have experienced that. Or like, you know, like I'm operating like any given day of the week, I feel like I'm operating within some sort of like completely twisted like psychological framework. It's like I don't even know what it's like to like not operate like with without like this self I'm constantly analyzing myself, I guess.
How are you like defining depersonalization? Because I can sympathize as I look back or compare myself. I don't know. I just don't think that I don't necessarily have a lot of stock in the classic image of like normal mental health. Or like, I don't know. I mean, I know what's I guess, oh, never mind. But are you talking about like feeling removed from your life, or like just having this metacognition of constantly frames and frames up, like analyzing your own thoughts, or what?
Yeah, I would say it's the latter rather than even though I would say like I mean, in a given day there'll be moments where, you know, like you're fully embodied and you feel grounded, but maybe a half an hour later you're like, and I'll be with people in a social environment. I know how to like play the part as if nothing's happening within my interior self. So like no one could be aware of the fact that I'm holding my son right now, and my wife's next to me, and we're in this social environment where everybody might be laughing and or carrying on in a conversation, but I'm like nothing about this feels real to me. Like I feel like, I mean, this goes back to like, it's the same feeling that I had during like night terrors as a child. So like I can only, and I'm analyzing it through that sensory emotional sort of framework that I developed as maybe a young child too. So I don't know if that's making sense, but sorry guys, this got I'm not trying to take it in any twisted or strange direction tonight, but maybe we're all feeling strange, who knows.
So it sounds like you're talking about the derealization more, because
Okay,
you're just having the sense of what I'm experiencing is not what I'm experiencing.
Mhm.
I mean, you can invoke your Fifth Amendment rights on this or lie, but it's frequently related to marijuana use. Some people kind of get in a cycle where it's like, to handle the anxiety, they need to smoke weed, but then the weed kind of gives them the depersonalization, derealization. In my own case, it wasn't related to that. Also, in my own case, it was like depersonalization squared, because I couldn't even tell that was what was happening. So it was kind of like, it was either a really bad form of it or something a little different, because there is frequently that metacognitive overactive mind dimension to depersonalization as well. So it sounds very classic, but I would say, given that it is so classic, my mind would jump to Mary Jane, etc.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um yeah, so I began consuming cannabis when I was probably like 14 or 15. And always had like, especially because I grew up in a very like conservative household where that was like prohibit, like if my parents found out about that, I would likely be like tossed out on the street, like it was just, it was a super heavy no-no. And then happy fourth. But yeah, then the cannabis, like, I mean, I smoked marijuana for a long time, and then I would take these breaks and swear it off, and then I'd always end up back at it, and it would always steamroll. So like every single time it would start small and occasional, and then it would be like, I had no impulse control in regards to it. So every single time I've consumed cannabis and gone through one of these seasons, it becomes perpetual, like all day use. So like, from the moment I wake up till the moment I go to bed.
Have you ever read Infinite Jest?
Infinite Jest?
Yeah. There's a character named Ken Airdaddy in that novel who does the exact same thing. And he always swears that this binge he's about to embark on is going to be the last one. And of course it never is. And he tries to get help in the kind of AA or Narcotics Anonymous world. And he can't get anyone to take him seriously because no one believes that marijuana addiction is a real thing. Not that I'm saying that that's what you
Sure.
have, but because it's viewed as a kind of lightweight drug.
Yeah, my my cannabis consumption has actually, I'm gonna go in my basement and see if that's any better. You guys are gonna see the underbelly of my life.
I don't mind the. It's not bothering me, the fireworks. They're shooting them off here too.
No,
but-
I'm just self-conscious about it, I think. Yeah, but I recently stopped consuming cannabis. So like, and when I say recent, it's been about maybe 5-6 months from like, I went from being like a daily smoker to someone that like consumed edibles all the time and would, have with like a strict dose of, but I mean, I was upwards of like 80 to 100 milligrams a day of whatever. All that to say is giving that up also coincided with like the year previous giving up smoking and a nicotine addiction, which I think all these things are good things, but they're also like ways in which I've grounded myself and medicated myself and stuff like that. And now I'm off of like I've been off of antidepressant medications for probably about 5 years now, SSRIs in particular, but like those were my bread and butter for maybe about 7 years. And then like that, I ended up getting off of those with the intention of just like living life sober, and then went back to cannabis shortly after because I just, had a free supply of it. And so then anyways, all that is a part of the story, and probably a significant one that plays a profound effect on my psyche that I'm not even fully.
It doesn't have to. It can occur without it. I mean, in my own case, it really started well before I tried anything. And I guess I would ask if in your case it was the same. You did mention.
Yeah. So from an early age, I would have like pretty major night terror episodes where like I would wake up in a half awake, half sleep state. And before returning to like a fully conscious state, I can literally recall like I remember I'd be in tears and in terror, and my mom would try to console me because I'd be like physically like waking up and enough to like walk out to wherever my mom was, and this would be before ever reaching like any sort of deep sleep, but and just crying and her like motioning me to come forward, but she'd be like talking and I couldn't understand what she was saying, and it sounded like everything that she said was like in hyper speed. Like it was like she was talking to me, but it was like just like is it as if you put it on 5x 5 times fast, like just and like you couldn't even like hear it, and that would fade out also simultaneously. Like I would feel her and I'd be like, Mom, why do you feel like plastic? And it was just like she didn't feel real. And so it was like that happened for what seemed like not just once or twice. I'm talking like this was like a 2-year period, which later then developed into other weird stuff too.
You mentioned how you can kind of identify with more or less every condition in the DSM-5, and I'm in the same boat. And the reason why I think is that conceptually a lot of these conditions seem like opposites, but epidemiologically they cluster. They all are related to each other. If you have one, your chances of having any of the others is much higher. And really, it's all related to inflammation. And a lot of that is diet, So, that's one area to explore. The other is, for whatever reason, people say naloxone, the drug that you take to prevent overdosing on heroin, cancels depersonalization. Also, the drug for narcolepsy and new vigil or Provigil, those work well for it. And I imagine also smoking would do well, would work well on that too. Just because the acetylcholine is going to cancel that sort of REM state. That sounds like it's associated. When you have those dreams, you said it was in the middle of the night, you said.
I would say early on, and this was like, I don't have these dreams now. They are
Toward the
not.
morning, or see, it matters if it's toward the morning or if it's in the middle of the night.
This would actually be before, because I remember specifically waking up and my parents would still be awake, but they had already put me to bed. Maybe like,
So it's like night terrors.
yeah,
It might be related to deep sleep.
yeah.
Well, I would have to double check that, see what night terrors are related to deep sleep. I think they might be. Did those dreams have a lot of propositional content or not really? Because the deep sleep dreams don't.
No, yeah, there
Right.
was.
That's how you tell. The REM sleep is vivid. You dream in all, people don't know this, but you dream in all levels of sleep. But only in REM are your dreams vivid. You dream in your deepest forms of sleep as well.
Yeah.
Your slow wave, delta wave sleep. Well, anyway, so yeah, I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm not qualified to give medical advice, but I would investigate those dietary and or chemical avenues. I think naloxone is pretty safe. I don't think you can overdose on that. It's meant to prevent overdose.
What did
I
your
want to take a moment really quick and say hi, Abigail. I have never met, but good to meet you.
what did your parents say? I'm curious. Because my I think I told you before, my younger sister, Natalie, told me that she used to have night terrors. That sounds very similar to what she went through. I'm just curious what your parents.
Yeah, I remember you. I think they would pray with me, and I think that was about it, and send me off to bed once I calmed down and stopped hyperventilating, and so
Sounds like
there was that.
Yeah, I think that's what they did with her mostly. Yeah.
And I think they brought it up to my general practitioner at the time, or whatever, the pediatric doctor, and they was like, totally normal. This is a thing all kids go through. But it was also like, yeah.
I don't know.
But then there was weird stuff that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
There was stuff that happened later on that felt connected to the same sort of consciousness that I was experiencing as a young person in those half awake, half sleep style states. But these were happening when I was fully conscious, like waking hallucinations and stuff. So
that's where Tinkerbell meets you, man. In the movie Hook.
Yeah.
It's that.
Or the old hat.
Yeah. I'm more inclined to and maybe that's because I was raised that way as well, but more, I guess you could say maybe mystical side of it, where I often, like, that's kind of what I think is like, not all your thoughts are your thoughts, or all your dreams are your dreams, and there's spirits that come and that are outside you, because you get thoughts that like seem like they're from outside, they don't feel like they're yours.
Yeah,
that's a threshold state where the ego boundaries are porous, so there is less of that definition between inner and outer. And in my own case, the depersonalization began in that kind of hypnagogia. That's what they call that liminal state. It's when you're falling asleep. And hypersomnia, just sleeping too much. And then that threshold state is where my kind of emotional numbness began. So I think that
Hmm.
there's definitely some kind of weird connection with sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess there's like always two ways to address these kinds of weird issues. One aspect of it being the like bottom up sort of medical perspective, and the other one being like the spiritual slash narrative perspective. And I think they complement each other and are like describing, the same thing. But I guess if the medical one, this is just whatever works for each person, and like if you're fine, if whichever one is most effective and like keeps you most motivated to heal. And for me, if you, for me, I've in the past like year or so healed very deeply from so much that looking back, I'm like, if I had gone after this, if this had been a different way and I'd gone after this, like by going to therapists and by like trying to take medicines or by trying to like label myself as it would have been probably it could have just dragged out so long. But because it
I
just
agree.
it was like in spiritual terms, and I didn't even put it to myself like I'm mentally ill, etc. For me, it was a spiritual problem. Like that's how I always framed it to myself, and I was on my own in this too, so nobody else could really understand anyway. But because of that, like, and I had this very sort of coherent story the whole time, as it were, and then did have some, I don't know, some kind of inexplicable thing of like a new kind of light insight into my own mind and a sense of love that I hadn't had before. I was just
Mhm.
able to almost get over a lot of these very complex issues that you could really dig into and break apart in all kinds of different ways for a long time in a coherent way, like all at once, because it was more of a top down, like narrative, like approach almost. I don't know. But I don't know what quote unquote kind of Christian or like whether your church has people who are more nuanced in their treatment of. I know the Orthodox Church is usually pretty good about that kind of thing.
Hmm.
A little bit more
Yeah.
imaginative than just pray or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that was my experience in the church in regards to what I have gone through over the last, I don't know, 10 or so years of my life, which obviously I think there was stuff going on in my childhood that went largely unaddressed until I actually had like, a psychological break where, I'm an adult now and I can't go to work, or I can't, like maybe I need to be hospital, stuff like that. But yeah, it was always like there was a spiritual problem, but it was always not. You talked about finding a new sense of love, and
Sorry, I'm gonna head out. See you guys later.
See you, Kyle.
Like,
good to meet you.
Thanks for stopping in.
Nice seeing you guys.
Hey there.
Look,
Uh,
I'm sad he's gone. He looked so. He had the dark room and it was nice and spooky.
It was lovely.
I don't know what you're doing. Like crawl around. You're like running around everywhere.
Dude, I have been. I've been trying to avoid the fireworks, but it sounded like there's peace.
Yeah.
Abigail, I do want to address what you were saying. But
What's happening?
dude, my neighbors, I think, just have a ton of fireworks. Dude, this is like,
Yeah, it sounds like
this is part of it. If it's, those aren't gunshots. Those are like the last time I was talking with you.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think because I had such unsatisfactory experiences with like talking with people in the church and people who I was in a church community with in regards to like what I had experienced. I remember trying to explain what was happening to me to a ton of different people and open up, and it always came back to like not necessarily like there's a like a new understanding of yourself and a new love for yourself, but I think it like truly pushed a deeper, and I think it was the kind of theology that I was in at the time, but it pushed me deeper into like a self-hatred. And like there must be something so corrupt and like morally flawed inside of me that like there was no, it just pushed me, but I don't know, maybe that's a little bit too harsh, because like I don't think I felt that 24/7.
That's definitely a thing. It reminds me of a story of this one saint from this one monastery, but he said one of the monks came and confessed like some kind of horrible temptation he was going through and weakness, and the father was like, or the priest over him was like, how you must be a horrible sinner to like even have such thoughts, like get out, you're not worthy to be here. And the poor monk, he goes all dejected, he like goes to leave, and somebody else meets him on the road and he tells him the story, and the guy prays to God that like the devil, he's like that the devil that was haunting this younger monk would come and haunt the older one who had like told him off. And then apparently they come back and find this older one, crying and repenting. He's like, I'm so sorry, like I didn't know it was so bad. And basically I think what the wiser one said to the dejected one was like, that God had, that he was stronger or something for having been given that battle in the first place, and the older one was only looking down on him because he had never even faced such a thing. I guess sometimes it just depends, I guess, whether it can be helpful, because I myself have framed some of my issues in both ways, whether it can be helpful to frame it as like this is some kind of outside like spiritual force that's like attacking me, versus like this is just something that my body is doing that's irrational. I don't know, like both can be helpful at different times, but no, like that's self-condemnation is not helpful at any time.
No, it reminds me too, like like I don't even think I realized, like, and this is something like I've known for years but not really worked through, is the type of I've heard Luke Thompson talk about POS, piece of shit theology, like that whole bit with the Calvinism and the total depravity and all that I think, I mean, I know for a fact it has its talons sunk still so deep inside of me, and sometimes maybe I can break out of that frame, but I think I spend the majority of my time still living inside of that frame. And
yeah, like that's probably the main thing.
Yeah, but like that's also like so demonic, like, and that's weird to say because it's like that's the church that I know, like that's the church that, so it's like that's,
no, it's so bad. Oh man, when I first started realizing this stuff, I was in a whole state. I'm listening to like the sermons that I've always listened to. I'm like, this is so messed up. I'm like not even able to.
And like even like listening to I think there's a podcast that it's man, it's called the prophetic, I don't know. Anyways, they did a series called Shame Core Records, and it goes through like all the like hardcore Christian music, which was like my mainstay as a young person in the evangelical church. It was like screamo hardcore music, but like even the lyrics in those songs are all like I said, I've gone back and still some of those songs are so near and dear to my heart, but like reading those lyrics, it's like straight up just like, I'm filth, I'm, just this horrible stuff that you're telling yourself, and that, yeah.
Oh, wretched man that I am type thing.
Yeah.
Terrible. Yeah, it's the precise opposite of what Jesus was going for, and it's hampers everything.
Yeah.
What kind of like environment or like media are you consuming as far as Christianity or like church are you in and stuff right now?
Great question. I actually, my my wife and I are not currently attending a church. I have not really actually attended like a church that regularly meets for probably at least 5 or 6 years. I started going to a skate church, which is great, but it's mostly skateboarding, and then like, and, like just guys that like I shoot the shit with that are also leaders in the skate church. But I went to a super conservative evangelical Bible school, and then I finished at a Christian university, and like I couldn't even bring myself to go to chapel, which was mandatory. I think I had to pay like $15 per chapel that I missed, but I was like, I'm not going to a single one of these things, and I pay like $400 at the end of the year just for not attending the chapel. But I don't know how to, but like what I have consumed in regards to like content outside, like my interest in and I because like it seemed like everybody I knew just like threw away their faith, even the people that like who I was in like really close community with, like even some of those people that I thought like I even envied the kind of like relationship that they had, and or the type of communion that they supposedly were having with God. And like these were spiritual, these were like major spiritual and like influences on my life. But like even a lot of those people walked away from their faith, and it was like I just could not ever do that. Like my faith is still intact, but it's not like it doesn't feel like it's like fortified by like this community of people that I'm surrounded, like who have come into a sense of belonging among, I guess is a good way to say it. So content, I don't know, it's all this stuff on this. I remember when I found the biblical series by Jordan Peterson, yada yada, and then there's Paul Vanderklay and the whole corner and yada, that's how. And I had some philosophy professors who were incredibly helpful, and even at Christian university that I graduated from, who like introduced me to people like Wendell Berry and the new agrarian movement, and like it started shifting my lens as to like, okay, like let's read Genesis instead of like understanding that God wants us to have dominion over the world and dominate it, and and subvert it and under our power and control, but to actually be like good stewards and see the world as a gift, and this a place where we are meant to belong, and is full of beauty and all this stuff. And that started changing my whole frame, because at one point I definitely held to the like a benevolent world theory, and it was the place to escape. Like this place was not, I didn't see beauty in the world anymore, and it was through putting my hands directly into the soil, that, and eating a few worms and stuff, like not really, but I did eat a worm before.
Dude, me too. Don't feel bad.
They're good. I mean, they're good. Like, I don't even understand.
They're good. I did when I was little. I think somebody dared me to.
Cannot relate. Maybe this is what is just uniforms.
The worm eating club.
I just save worms off the sidewalk if they're dying.
I mean, have you ever, it smells like breakfast, like after it rains, you know, it's like, I don't know.
Worms are just the air, or just the world.
All of it, the
All
whole
of it.
world.
The worms and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just take-
All right. I'm like really curious. Do you feel like sharing any of your night terrors? Like,
Oh, man.
have you seen The Hag?
I have, Jason, and I've wanted to talk to you about it for some time.
The same lady, and she looks
Uh,
like a real life version of the old lady from Snow White, sort of. That's kind of what I saw.
Can I describe to you what I saw? This is actually
Yeah.
something that happened. I was probably 15. I was taking a high school class um, in environmental science where we had a science experiment where I needed to be to the school early. And I had not had night terrors in some time. Years had passed. I had some weird stuff. Maybe it would be worth sharing in between, this time and that time. But this is the story about the hag. And anyways, I got to school. I was setting up for a project. It was before the majority of the students had arrived, and I needed some like wire snippers to snip some wire because I was making these bird feeders that I was setting up to do like this study. Anyways, it doesn't matter. And I remember I went to another science lab to get some wire snippers, and I came back and I went down to my little raveled up grocery bag, and I went to like unwrap it, and my teacher is back in the science lab of this room that we were in. And it was only me and her in the room. And I went to unravel the bag, and like, I looked down and my hands like just like looked like they were in warp speed. And like it was like a flash, like a second flash where like I unraveled the grocery bag, and then it was just like it happened so quickly. And I remember it felt dark and weird, and I didn't know what to do. And I like almost felt like I was gonna pass out. And I looked up at my and who knows how this could be related, and some like we could explain it away in scientific terms. But I looked up at like my teacher, and she wasn't my teacher. Like both of her eyes turned like dark black, and like her right eye, or I'm not sure if it was her right or left eye, but it like started like melting out of her face, and like the black goo started like dripping down her cheek. And it was like she turned pale, and like her hair turned like, I don't even know why. It reminded me of like old hag hair, and like there was flies. This is why it reminds me of the old hag. And it was like she was a rotting corpse, and like there's flies, like 3 flies in perfect like spatial rings, just like rotating around her head, like just like just like in circles. And I remember seeing it and putting hands back down on the table and saying, dear God, dear God, dear God, dear God, dear God. Like just I didn't know what else to say. And like I looked back up at her, and she was my teacher again.
That is terrifying. So wait,
And
you were fully conscious when that happened?
yeah, I mean, I
Like,
don't know if I slipped into an alternate state of
yeah.
consciousness the moment that it happened, but I was like,
Yeah.
Drove to school. I think I was a sophomore or a
Wow.
junior, like drove to school, and like, I think I had began consuming cannabis at this point too and stuff. I don't know if that's related, but like all like there was just that that experience was very, I mean, it was very, very vivid and extremely, like, it's been, I can still see it like it happened yesterday. And I remember, like, the teacher asked me when I looked back up, like, are you okay? Are you okay? Like, she seemed panicked. And I was like, because I must have looked at her like she was crazy. And then, or like I was terrified. I probably had the look of terror on my face. And she was like, are you okay? And I go, I think I just hallucinated. And she was like, do you need to go to the office? And I was just like, no, no, no. Like, tried to like reassure her that I was fine. And she was a really cool teacher. And so she was like, didn't push the issue. And I went about my day.
Have you ever had anything like good to the same intensity as all of these dark experiences?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question. And I almost want to like be careful. Like, I don't even want to like, I almost want to like slow down and think about it, because it's like, I think so, but maybe not to the same like visual.
It
And
probably happens all the time.
yeah.
Like I was when you said that, Abigail, I was walking out of the courthouse because I was working there, and I came out, and I don't know if some guy was getting back from the military or what, but I just look over and there's some guy and his little daughter just runs up, and it was one of those things where he just picks her up and they're just spinning and he's hugging her. And I'm like, that feels like opposite when you see something like that. If you actually pause and notice it, you're just like, this feels like the good that surpasses that evil times.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, kind of more personal or like internal. So if you're disconnected, if you are disconnected, and even if you see something good, like, there's just a barrier.
Yeah. Do you mean
between-
specifically with your question, like good spiritual visions, sort of?
Yeah.
But I guess what I mean is something that has been that full and like immersive and like had so much of an impact and been powerful and like transformative in that way. Just to be able to capture, I don't know.
Oh, man.
Have you?
Yeah, I think that's hard, but a lot of times they're like, they take like this weird nuanced vision. Like, I've had to explain, or I've tried to explain this on multiple occasions, but like, even like, oh man, I don't know how to touch it. But it's like when
Oh,
What? Man, Luke, you're all over the place.
no.
I'll send him another invite. I don't know. He probably hit something on his phone. Oh, have you had any experiences like that, Abigail? That you can think of?
That bad.
Or not, well, I mean bad or good, like you were asking
Not
him,
any
sort of.
like that exteriorized to the external world, but definitely both intense isolation, so much so that I didn't even know how cold and like isolated I was from just life and like humanity and other people and the world and like my own body until afterwards, by comparison. And then the whole process by which I got out of all of those, I won't say all, but like most of those dark patterns of thought, and especially that mindset of being a horrible wretch, just everything, like all of the traumas, so much. A lot of it was, I would say, like an altered state of consciousness, like being on caffeine, but I was not taking any substances or anything. I was just me and God, or however you want to put it. But like, my entire self was just going on overdrive and just seeing things, and literally like I could feel my thoughts just like gently just being like reshaped into just like new ways, and I just see so much more of what was going on inside of me. And I guess the point that I was gonna, or that I would have brought up with him is like, to me, having experienced both halves of like what is the mind and the imagination and the spirit is capable of, it's sort of a double-edged sword. You have to, the weapon against like the bad, say a really bad, strong imagination or like spiritual half or overactive mind is more of the good, like you overcome evil with good type thing. So it's almost like I got out of my internalized, super intense metacognition by having some sort of new light and like sense of, it is a very personal sense, but like of love and tenderness and basically everything that people associate with the Holy Spirit, which is originally I was like, oh, that's what that is, because I was yeah. Anyway, which gave me like good metacognition, like insight into, oh, whoa, everything in my mind and like my thought patterns is so messed up, and I this guilt and this worry, and like just almost seeing that like as if there were these dark like little vines just sprouting off everywhere, and then I don't know, something somewhere between it slash me slash us in operation, just reshaping that and like learning better habits. And it's all felt very like miraculous, and definitely came with a sense of being floating and like being very detached from whatever mundane reality was going on, but like in a good way, or yeah, in a good way, and yeah, in a healing way.
You look like totally different, man. I don't know what happened. You
I-
come back, you're just like all of a sudden chilling. Before you were running around everywhere.
Dude, my
I'm sorry. Abigail was saying something important.
I was pretty much done. Just that.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not you. You know, she was talking about. Yeah, you could go back because you said you were going to mention it when he was here too. Do you want to reiterate what you were saying a little bit, or?
Yeah, I guess just that the reason that I ask is because I know that for the like spiritual part of us or our imagination or anything, those are connected, and like the mind and the imagination and the spirit, and like the openness, the spiritual realm, or however you frame it, is so powerful either for good or for evil.
Mm.
And at least in my experience, the way to have overcome the like evil and choking and like twisting aspect of that has been with a lot of the good, and like very intense experiences of the like divine, or like the coherence and like the beauty of the world, and like love and good metacognition, as in having clarity and insight into how sick was my mind, and almost be able to see it from above and like just gently sort of
Yeah.
like change it. That is like, it's, for the mind is almost like a double-edged sword. I think the more, if you can find things that feed what's good, then, and you have like the strength and a good worldview and like a good self-image and good voices in your head, then the bad ones will be crowded out.
Yeah. No, and that's been, I mean, yeah, that's been
I think with the process of healing has been incredibly slow. It has been like you mentioned, it was, I think maybe you used the word gentle, and um, it's been through the new word that I've used is the Sophianic. It's been through the this very like I said, it was getting back, and like when I look back at it, like how I recovered from, and not that I'm fully recovered, or whatever, but like the ways in which uh, I've experienced healing has been through like holding embodied practices with like gardening. But it was like that was where like the world started becoming alive again, and so now it's like an indispensable like feature of my life. Like I don't know what I would do without gardening. That even in my mind, as I say that, I'm like, well, that's kind of like crazy, because like that's not Christianity, that's gardening, like, but that's where I, ultimately have found, or it's like getting in the river and fishing, and like it was like I just became, I remember when the world, like when my world kind of came crashing in on me, and then like went through a lot of darkness, and then coming out of that, like it was like I spent literally like every single night out on the pier on Lake Michigan fishing, and I found like these old men out there, and I spent time with them, and yeah, we were drinking and chain smoking cigarettes, and from 11 o'clock at night until 7 in the morning the next day. But like I was out there, and I'd have a stringer full of fish, and I'd bring them home, and I'd fillet them, and then I'd smoke them, and like that was, but there was some sort of like it was like reorienting my understanding of the world, and the world was becoming beautiful again in ways that I'd never thought it could, and there was a new gratitude that came over me through that process for the life that I have, and the beauty that, and the depth of that beauty. Because what was really the interesting piece of that, and this is the coincidence of opposites, is that like when life is like so like squeezed out, and then like you like it, but then that sponge is filled up again, it's like it holds more water, like it's like so saturated, and that's like the experience. Not that sponge can't get wrung out again, but like that it can fill back up, and like and that the wringing out of that sponge is just it's not permanent. That's one of the huge things, is once I realized that this was not, that no psychological state was this like permanent thing that I thought it was going to be, and that like there was various modes of existence that I could like opt into that could bring me out of it. Like, but I mean, it was full circle. Like even Cal talking about inflammation and like changing your diet, that's a huge piece. So it was exercise, like having an embodied practice, like running or climbing or skateboarding, or yeah, you're a climber, right? I saw that video that yeah, but you're injured.
I am. I know.
I'm sorry.
My mental health has been holding on barely. Just like watching all the videos, like climbing in my head.
Yeah. Oh, it's so addictive.
It's good. Like that was my, I don't know, for me, you say that your process was slow. For me, it has just been, it's slowing down now, but like lightning fast. I don't know. Whatever got a hold of me must have been very done with me being I was. Like I feel like I was.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so it was just all mostly in the mind, and just like not I was like in a floating place, but then climbing is like something like you say, like an embodied practice that's integrated, and I can sort of like hold on to it, give me something, and I guess was a consistent thing that got me out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Very dark. Yeah. And the other thing, or like for instance, I was getting, thank God, the only addictive substance that I've ever been exposed to is caffeine, which is like when you stop it for a little bit, it goes away. Because oof, even in the way that I would use, like, I went for a couple weeks where I was just drinking like all day just to keep myself thinking decently and like able to think. And then went to Paris and was able to replace that with more real like sources of excitement and interest, and that broke me of that, and then more climbing broke me of the like caffeine thing. So I'm very encouraged to hear that you have like stumbled on those same, or not stumbled on because they're real and like that's what works, so of course, but on those same principles of like the body and like more integration with the world and like living patterns in the world, that the way that it works, because like yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
And almost like everything that I don't want to do is what I need to do. It sounds really weird, but like I wake up and have woken up, and this happens more seasonally, but like even lately, like I've been waking up and I have not wanted to face the day. Like, so then I got to reach for that like inner stoicism or whatever sometimes. Like sometimes it literally is like listening to like, I don't even know, like the song that I know has gotten me through, like, or whatever, or like, what did I think I even put on like a Joe Rogan compilation motivation thing, it's like, but like, but also like even like getting up and like having an actual like taking time to actually center myself by prayer and reading the word and filling myself with the word of God and just talking to God and just like spilling my beans, and that's helpful too. But yeah, it's like, but like you're saying, man, it's so like, one thing that like has been crazy is like the antidepressants, they worked, but they also didn't work. And so like it was, I got away from them, but like I'm still figuring out how to like the coping mechanisms that I've developed they're not ultimately healthy. And most of them, like obviously the running and the climbing and the fishing and stuff, that's all good stuff, but like there's a lot of other ones too, like that were just not healthy, like the cannabis consumption and the nicotine and the coffee, which is still always here. And I'm sipping on a bottle of wine tonight, because it's just like, that's still part of me too, that, like probably needs to die at some point. But at the same time, yeah, it's, you gotta take things one step at a time.
Yeah, and it's like replacing the principle of like that if you leave the house, and like replacing and kind of taking steps up and like replacing with more real.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the things that people will do is, say you're addicted to something, like caffeine or something, or drugs, and it gives you that like good experience. People might think that the addiction itself is the problem, or like being attached to the thing, and that needs to die. It's like then you end up sort of attacking the wrong part of yourself, and you're like, whereas in reality, like the only difference between being addicted to like an unhealthy pattern or an unhealthy thing, or like a substance, versus say having like a really like being attached to a person in like a loving close relationship, is just that you happen to be addicted to something that's healthy for you and is actually mutually like feeding you good. But almost like the patterns of attachment are the same. Like you're still dependent on this in like water and food. We're addicted to those, but that's okay because they're good for us.
Yeah.
Like just like healthier,
Becoming,
but it's the same patterns.
and becoming like, sometimes I think we've deluded ourselves, or at least I know that I've deluded myself to believe that the fantasy is better than the real. Like, if that makes sense. And I don't
Yeah.
think it's so like, for instance, the less real thing, me experiencing reality drunk
Yeah.
or stoned, is more real because it has some sort of libacious effect on the sensory and emotional experience that I'm having. But it ultimately is not real. And I've lost the sensibility that I once had, and that childlikeness, and the imagination that came with that childlikeness, like you said earlier, which I think it like that allowed me to not only experience the real, but also like, man, I'm so interested in the concept of becoming more real. And I don't know how to talk about it really, but that idea is fascinating to me because like that that imagination is still there, that childlikeness is still available to us. And it's just like, what we've done a lot to like put walls in between that experience of childlikeness. And it's like, how can I break down those walls? How can I get the scales off my eyes so I can actually see what is real? And it's like those precious moments with my son, you know, like, and that time with my wife, you know. And that's what sucks too, is with the derealization. It's like you might be in one of those precious moments, but like you're almost second guessing that experience because like everything's perfect, but like you're almost like, how can that be, you know, or whatever. And it's like, instead of actually experiencing how real that is, you know, it's almost like you're in it, unable to, because maybe you have all this like Hollywood shit in your head or whatever, like you're not, I don't know if what I'm saying is
Yeah,
making
I know.
sense.
Yeah.
First world problems.
yeah.
Sorry, it was right before you hopped in. He mentioned first world problems, and then he said
Okay.
all the Hollywood shit in your head, where it's like we fill our head with all the noise instead
Right.
of yeah. Because he said he was in Africa for a while, and in Africa you probably engage more in your imagination and in the
Yeah.
real world together, because you don't have a TV screen to dive into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
think
did
that.
I know I didn't want to come back.
Mm. I feel like everybody in America thinks it's paradise. Everybody wants to come here. This is great. Everybody outside is like,
Yeah.
but I like becoming more real and just the general, what you said, Sophiatic, and also the term of the enchanted world and kind of or re-enchanted world, and the discussions around those two concepts. And that's something that I have been really interested in and experiencing a lot of lately. And it's exactly as you said, it's not projecting this thing to like make the world that is really so dull exciting. It's opening yourself up to what actually is there instead of having all. I think a lot of it has to do with, from my experience at least, more and more coherence and beauty, but beauty and coherence are similar anyway. Just the feeling that my life is a coherent, meaningful story, and which is connected to the patterns of everything else. Just like seeing more.
Mm-hmm.
My entire vocabulary is the word patterns lately, but seeing more of that and like the inner skeletons of things and how they all connect, and
Yeah.
thinking more. And then that sort of connects the world inside your head with the world outside, and like
Mhm.
maybe roots you a little bit more into, instead of being disconnected, like drifting way up here and then down, or even just like I used to read a ton as a child and basically lived in those worlds very much. But I don't know how I survived, how disconnected I was. I didn't know. That's why I was happy. Like I didn't know. There wasn't anything else. But I now, and even now, like when I read or when I watch a TV show, I'm not just watching it as like an escape that's totally disconnected. I'm always sort of engaged and like seeing how it connects to my own life and people like
Yeah.
that, and like the world, and like making all these connections, and it sort of keeps me in the network of things. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're using the word patterns. I think it's helpful, at least to me. Yeah,
and it's,
I'm very inclined to, like I said, I'll probably lean maybe more, I guess you could say, the mystical side, but especially with what like even Kyle was saying in the beginning. But
Mm.
I'm more inclined to say that like there's no difference between like the diet thing. If you think of patterns and the idea that the ideas behind it all, it's like it's all spiritual to me at the same time as it being natural. Because I'm like, what is the like? I'm not trying to make anybody a vegetarian or anything, but if I actually sit back and think like, what is the idea coming behind tearing into some flesh and devouring it? I'm like, that doesn't seem like a like or the origin of it. I'm like, if I was put in the garden in Genesis, I don't know where that thought would come from, you know?
Yeah.
Like of
Yeah.
just like, and then I'm like, well, if I get back to the original pattern of things or the idea or the intelligence or thought behind it, I'm just like, it seems um like all the I don't know the right words. I guess you say the patterns have come down on such smaller levels where we don't even notice them. They're imperceptible.
yeah.
Like little things we do, we're just like
Yep.
are connected to higher eternal ideas or
Oh yeah.
thoughts or whatever that
Yeah.
um, are there. But and then the images are just more compelling to me too. Like you could think of like smoking cigarettes or something, and then that's probably a bad example. You could think of I guess I often compare like money, the desire of money, something like sirens or something like that. Like the the idea of like mermaids dragging you down or something. Like just your any desires you have, I guess you could say like if alcohol becomes an extreme desire or cigarettes or money or something like that, it has this capability to like it's seductive and it pulls you in. It's this beautiful siren singing to you, and you hear it singing to you. Like that's the thing. Like if I'm actually sitting back and being like aware, I'm like, man, it sounds like there's this thing calling to me, and it's like this temptation, and I know it's gonna get me. Like I know it'll drag me down eventually into these depths, and then it's like then it's the natural and the spiritual. It's like but the spiritual image, like the hag or whatever, is more uh compelling
Mm-hmm.
and impactful, but it's in such a strange way that it really alters your reality when you get stuff like that. Like because you'll act different, and then your whole world's different, and it alters the material realm or whatever, you know.
Yeah. I mean, the largest psychological motivator that I think at least the psychological science converge on is fear, and so it's like that's I mean, when you just think about that and then you think about hell and and just like, yeah, like man, I've spent so much of my life operating out of like a spirit
Yeah.
of fear and captivated by that fear and chained down by fear. And it's like, oh my God, how do I even begin to like I've got to dig for miles just to like reach the surface. Uh, and I mean, because it feels like you're starting at the center of the earth. I mean, it just is like,
Wow.
Yeah.
um,
Sure.
I don't know if I've experienced that. um I'd really like to get you get my sister Natalie to talk to you sometime. She's talked to me about fear, in a way that I don't think I've bit off that heavier chunk of it before. Or it sounds like you're talking about probably something similar. Can you describe it more? That like is it like a paralyzing fear or what is it?
Well, it's more just like an approach to reality, I suppose, where
Yeah.
it's uh, where even like the liberty that you have in your person to do anything, but like that, I don't even know like how that also plays into like your understanding of or like that understanding of fear, but like it's like I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to get at.
Sorry, it's a weird question anyway.
But I think I like probably just use language that just sounds like way too like hyperbolic because digging out of the center of the earth, maybe it's like
No,
Uh,
never
it
experienced that, and it's like, well, I haven't either, but
it's like that though. And I think it's good to give a lot of the times fighting with like mental or spiritual health feels really mundane because what you're actually accomplishing is like it was a great achievement for you and I managed to go to the grocery store without being OCD about giving cracks to every single person. Like, they should be eternally damned. Speaking of fear, but like that was huge. But putting it in terms of more embodied like concepts helps to make you feel like you're actually accomplishing something, which of course we are, because to help ourselves and heal ourselves is like the most important and is a reflection of, I mean, we are sort of a reflection of the rest of the universe, but yeah, fear. It's pretty much all of healing, or something that I started thinking a while ago was that like all sin, instead of beating myself up for the things that I would do wrong, just recognizing that basically what that comes from is fear. You don't usually condemn somebody for being afraid. You want to comfort them and help them, which is the right instincts with people who are hurting. And basically like fear of death and fear of hell and fear of doing something wrong. And like, just that was the first thing that became clear to me when, in Christian terms, the Holy Spirit managed to break through into my heart. Was just that every single thought I have goes off into about 5 different branches of like worry and guilt that are completely eating up my mental space and just choking any kind of anything. Just like, yeah, it's so much weight. Even like physically, I remember I felt literally so much lighter, just like everything. Yeah.
Yeah. In I know that you can remind yourself of the truths like worrying, like even, and you guys are catching me at a time too where like the circumstances of life it just seem super overwhelming, and so it's like, but like you can like you can get, I've gotten myself back in the state of mind today that like, okay, like I'm so blessed, but like that still doesn't change how complicated life is, right now. But it's like, but like it has brought a lot of peace to like the overarching like if because I was in it earlier today where my mind was in 1,000, like my mind will be so riddled with fears like that. It, like my counselor, I think he recently described, but like it was wild. I grew up my whole life believing that I had, well, not my whole life, but since my uh, early 20s, where I was diagnosed with like anxiety disorder and depression. Later, in my 30s, when I'm talking to a counselor and he's telling me I'm pretty sure you just have ADD. But we're going back to that DSM-5 stuff, whatever the terms. But like the my mind will, like the very fact, like my mind will run through these infinite possibilities, and it'll catastrophize everything, and it'll bring it to its ultimate conclusion. Like it'll bring it to the worst conclusion that you could come to, and stopping my mind before it spirals down those rabbit holes or what have you. Ember. And yeah, it stopping my mind before it goes that way, like in that. But at the same time, like, man, there's so much, like, you put in all this effort, right? And like it can be so exhausting to do put in all the effort to try to like like even CBT is just like this like exhaustive process, cognitive behavioral therapy. And like I'm trying to figure out like there's something about like you're never just like allowing yourself to be, you're just constantly still stuck within your mind. even the way of healing yourself, you're still like in this paralysis of analysis. And so it's just like, yeah, like you just never really seem to get anywhere. And so it's like, Amber, can you just
Probably the fireworks.
Yeah, it is. Well, actually, there's somebody like out in their car, like 10 feet away, just like chilling. So she sees them. She's good.
She's just doing her job.
Yeah, she is.
I guess that's the critique that I have. I have no personal experience with the traditional methods of healing the mind. To me, where it could go wrong for people for whom it does go wrong is like that it just becomes more analysis and more depersonal and more like just like ugly, I think. And the book, it's a very big book, I'm not even through it, but it's called The Ethics of Beauty. Talks about therapy, it talks about beauty first approach versus the like goodness and truth picking these apart approach versus basically what's healing you, like rerouting the person in a community and in the world and building up, find the life and feed it. Find what's already healthy, even if it's just a little bit, and like feed that for all it's worth.
Sherry, and I mean, you guys all know her, but that, and this might not be addressing what you just said, but it's a thought where like you're constantly going through your life and you're making these like judgments, and you're assessing, you're putting them into like categories or like and placing value around them. And like I don't know, it's just like, not that I'm assessing them in regard to like their goodness and their badness, and like she relates that to the idea that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and like that's our problem. And like that's certainly my own, like when I've heard you guys talk about that, it's like, okay, you just said it, like that's it. And like having that consciousness isn't always a good thing, or maybe I don't, what am I trying to say? It's like,
yeah,
I want to be able to get, like I want my being to be less obsessed with like the good and bad and the right and wrong, and to just be, and I think that in so being, the world becomes more real. I don't know how.
No, yeah, like I was been bothered by the same thing lately, but I put it to myself a different way. I made a video about it, but I think like that in every medium, sort of this hierarchy of goodness will immediately pop up. Like, let's say you're even eating a meal, you're instantly going to categorize like, this is the best part. I think you can't get rid of that by trying to get rid of it, because it's just how reality is structured.
Sure.
It's the structure, it's like the skeleton underlying. So if you try to get rid of that, everything just melts away anyway. You have to have it. There's always a hierarchy, but because as you're saying, not to make it the first thing, but like to see that there are alternative hierarchies always, and like they're all embraced within a more like cohesive beauty base where everything's more neutral and like more cohesive. But it's both, but then yeah, just not like becoming obsessed with the bones of things.
Yeah.
It's definitely
I love that. Yeah. Dude, have you guys ever had the sensation just like watching a cat and then you're like, I wish with all my might that I could just be that cat right now?
I've had that with cows.
And that with cows.
I'm driving by and I see them out there and I'm just like, God, they look like they're living the life. They're just standing there eating grass. Like, I don't have a care in the world. I don't know about cats.
Well, that's also the weird thing too, is like we live in, I think there is a certain this isn't good content to read, but I read Capitalist Realism by, I can't even think of the guy's name. He killed himself in 2018. Like his, I mean, complete and total nihilistic outlook on like the art situation. But I mean, definitely takes it to, anyways, what am I trying to say?
cows.
Yeah, cows. It's what am I-
Animals versus
yeah, but like I often think like that, like our modern world, like we're not, are we like I had a good buddy who, I mean, he was a missionary kid. He no longer, is interested in faith at all. He was the one that introduced me to this guy. Oh, Mark Fisher is the guy that wrote that book, and he's super into him, and he's like, you got to read it. So I did, and I read the book. We've talked about it a few times, and it converges with Jacques Ellul's like technological society, but like Jacques Ellul has he has at least a dialectical view of the world where like even though he has a complete and totally bleak outlook on like our reality, he still has the kingdom language that comes in to sort of rescue like the world from that, and like and not in the way that like, well, we're gonna screw the world, this is a terrible place, but like he's able to reconcile the Christianity with like this completely bleak outlook for our current technological world that we live in. So anyways, all that to say, it's getting back to this idea like of like animals, they don't have these like obligations that we currently have, like when you think about like the necessity of like needing to have like all the ducks in a row that you have to have in order to like function in the world. And it's like, I want to get back to like this, like truly, like you read the scripture, like, like God will provide for you. Like he provides for the sparrow. And like, do you think God's not going to provide for you? And like this idea of like just trusting God and like getting back to that sort of thing. Like I have like secured this small fortune, and I've operated within this modern world to like secure this small little fortune and have a house and have the cars and have this and have that and like make sure the refrigerator works and like all this stuff, and you struggle and strive for that, and not and like I don't think this pain is unique. I think it's you know, uniquely mine or uniquely the modern world or whatever, but like there's I can go out in the garden and I can see the beauty that exists where like all these symbiotic relationships are taking place, where there's like these this biome of like reciprocity that's just occurring, you know, and I'm just like observing it, and like and it works, and it doesn't need me, you know, but it does. I mean, it does, but like it's I don't know what I'm trying to get at, but it's like it's
Alive.
completely unaffected by like all these like strictures that the modern world that we're living in currently puts human beings under. And then you see like it really does sort of like peel the blinders off of like how messed up our world is. But like there's still that biome in your backyard. It's so beautiful. But then you walk back inside and it's like, I don't even know. Or you get back online or you go to your 9 to 5 or whatever. And it's just like, it's dark again. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, it's like learning to where to put your attention.
Yeah.
I was thinking that recently, like riding my bikes. I'm like the whole time, you know, the trees are still here, the flowers are still here, the good is still here. You just looked away from that, and therefore you get yourself shut up in this box and start believing a lot of lies about reality. And I think the idea of like a scarcity mindset is really interesting versus a mindset of there being enough and there all being more. The scarcity mindset being what is encouraged by fear and by like capitalism in its present state, and like by fear mostly, versus you learn if you look more at just more life, more living systems, you get into more of a mindset of like, oh, it's okay. But it's so much about perspective and literally just where you choose to look. And sometimes you just don't have the energy, right? And then to put your mind in the right place and look at the right things. But it's the habit of that. And you start to draw more of the right conclusions and be able to see through all of out of control patterns. Yeah.
But do you ever guys experienced how refreshing it is when the power goes out? Is that, or am I the only one? Is that kind of what we're getting at here? Where it's just like, when you just have I remember, I think it was like right around when COVID started, there were a bunch of tornadoes that blew through here and the power went out for like 3 or 4 days. And I was just like, God, it's just so nice. It was just so nice. And you come home and there's like the family sitting around the fireplace instead of like everybody being in their room watching their own TV. It's like you don't have anything else to do, so you just live life instead of.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, no.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was just about the being around the fire instead of the TV. That was, I guess, the other connection to like where to put your attention. For what Pedro said. Jonathan Peugeot. If you're in the, do you know him? His videos, Luke.
I love Jonathan Peugeot.
Yeah. Okay. Good. He's like in that circle. Okay. But he says about worship, and so another sickness of the modernity, is that instead of like having our worship centered on truly really significant things, it just becomes fractured off into all of this momentary stream of just little like memes and things. And like it's possible. I like Olivier Clément's perspective on history and transfiguring time.
I'm not familiar with this.
I have an audiobook of it on my channel, but it's very deep, very mystical, and he goes into like the nature of time and history and an interesting reading of Revelation. But he says that basically history is an outplaying. The real history occurs in human hearts, and the external history of societies and is sort of the stage for and the outpouring of or the outworking of what's happening inside of us. So like what we have around us is just the context in which we can grow and we can like heal from the evils, you know, of our time, because there's always evils of our time, right? It was brutal in the Middle Ages, sure, etc. So like I guess I'm always not wanting to be that person to just complain about modernity as I sit
Sure.
my aspirin to solve my headache and such. But then at the same time, I think it's so important to recognize the evils of your time so you can heal from them. Because like you can, but not if you just think, oh, this is all fine and I should just be grateful for where I am. And it's like, then you're gonna stay there and stagnate and continue not living. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's like that black and white thinking where you are like, where I've gone through and like, I'm rejecting all social media. I'm getting off the internet for good this time. Like, the pre-modern world's the only world for me, or whatever. And then you try to like drink rainwater for a couple months or whatever, and then it's like, not really. I'm just saying, like, maybe that's like, you go that far, and then it's like, okay, like maybe it's okay to
Yeah.
like at least have Zoom on your computer, chat with some friends you have on the internet, like, but like for me, it'll be so black and white because this evil thing can exist on like, yeah, it's, how it goes.
Yeah, it's not like the thing that's evil, it's sort of the patterns that
Yeah.
and then it's discerning, are you strong enough to like engage with that? Like I have realized recently, just from being more in tune with my body, myself, like my emotions and life, how strong even like reading a book is. Because that goes up a level and you're like, it's more intense, almost time is speeding up, you're like living the whole lives of people in seconds. And some days I wake up and I'm like, I cannot handle this. Like it's too much, too complicated. Forget going on the internet and immediately having just all this instant. You have to have like a very strong goal and a very strong sense of coherence to be able to keep your way and all of that and still make it feel like you know what you're looking for instead of just being I think about it like that, like navigating this environment, because essentially it is a spiritual. If we were in a less modern culture, we might think of it, or would think of it, I think, in more spiritual terms, like in more spiritual realm of the internet, where it's less embodied and like magical, basically things are possible, and like it more helps to deal with it with the proper respect, maybe.
Yeah, like the reverence also recognizes the potential harm that can come from it, as well as like the obvious or clear glory that can come from it too. So yeah. Holy moly.
Yeah, I was gonna say for sort of, I guess the two halves of what helps me, or what is helping me become more integrated with, and like myself and with the world. One half has been, like you're saying, to be more embodied and more connected with life and see the patterns of nature and the patterns of story and have a healthy theology so that my universal narrative is not so messed up and all of that. That's like the context. Then also internally, in psychological terms, this is like negative self-talk and like not and like your thought patterns, but internally having like a good voice or like good voices in my head to counteract that one that's always like attacking and or almost just. And for me, this came about at first in more of like a mystical, sudden, miraculous way that I was not expecting. But I think it is also something that can be cultivated, and I later have had to more cultivate or invite the way of thinking. Like basically what changed and allowed my thoughts to start healing and rejecting the overwhelming anxieties and catastrophizing was just like a sense of surrounding love or like tenderness and acceptance and sort of clarity to like, almost like space to like hear those thoughts and like like almost give a pause to like, okay, and almost just like maybe instead of it just being me and me and me in my head fighting me, and and just like only that kind of bitter, scared, angry voice in my consciousness. Suddenly there was sort of someone else, or you could think of it as a healthier aspect of myself, or however, but I find it less lonely to think of it as God or Christ or the Holy Spirit or somebody else who loves me, but who could kind of be there with me, present to my thoughts, present to my feelings, but distant enough to provide some commentary or like a little bit of relief, like a little bit of space. And I guess it's connected with prayer, or like having a mental, instead of just a mental monologue twisting around on itself and trying to fix itself and make itself healthier, a mental like dialogue, the other voice being whatever you've internalized of like the scriptures and God and people who love you, who you know are like just like all the good, the other voice being that you can like push up against, and like having that sort of concept in there along with the darkness, then you get into a habit of like almost, instead of just saying this disaster and just like letting it take you, you're like, oh, there's like someone else there, so you're praying that at them, and then to open up and like listen for a response or like better thoughts or like a better feeling or like a better perspective. And the more that I built that habit of like having it be a dialogue instead of just a monologue, maybe trying to self-correct, the more that sort of took over, has become a habit of like always turning everything up to this more light and goodness, insofar as I could grasp. Like that allowed me to, just feel like more safe, in a sense of being supported and surrounded, and like not alone with the darkness.
Like a communion with an external, like self-sacrificial love type thing. Is that kind of what you? Would that be a way of saying it too? Where it's not just yourself, but you realize that it is love that holds everything together, and you're kind of in this communion with the love that gives itself. And I don't know, because I was just thinking, you mentioned it was a lot earlier in the conversation of kind of having the whole top down, bottom up idea, and it seems like love is both. And when it's at the top, it's the perfect thing to be in communion with like the two sides of yourself, whatever your logic, your emotion, however you want to look at it. Everything's kind of in this communion with this external love that's above you, but then at the same time, it's in the belly of hell too. Like, even if you start to fall or sink, it's like it's still there to catch you. And it's kind of being in this, like you said, you're not stuck in this internal monologue of just this cycle. You're actually communing with this I know the Christian words for it. I'm trying to think of what you would call it, like besides that. It's not the universe, like you wouldn't really call it that, but
the divine milieu. I always say the divine milieu. I like that term from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. That's almost, I use that term instead of the term God a lot because it makes sense. The divine milieu. That is just sort of a shorthand for all of the patterns, like all of the life and the logos and the angels and like the different threads that are connected to us, that sustain our life, also that are inside of us. And
I love that.
Yeah, so how do you spell that? What is this?
Milieu?
Milie.
Milie.
Yeah.
His writing is very good, by the way, for a beautiful view of the cosmos.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that. That's a good way.
Yeah. I think I need language like that.
Yes.
To conceptualize because I think the language that like I can't find use in a lot of like
Mhm.
the language that I currently have, I guess.
Yeah,
'cause
That's
they-
the other super important thing that started changing for me, like finding terms and almost I find a new term for something and that just opens up so much more, and then seeing
Yeah.
connections between terms, getting into etymology, language and words, because that's how we can touch the whole world. Like that is endless power to transform and make more healthy your world to you.
Mhm. Yeah, because yeah, otherwise you're it's like because yeah, because it's binding together more things like rather than isolating them, and like because a lot of times I'll listen to somebody talk about their relationship with God and I'll be like, I can kind of identify with that, but like that I don't even know what that, like I have no idea what you're talking about, like like or what have you, and but I struggle a lot with like, and I'm a chronic professor, but like I know it's deeply ingrained in me, but like there's a constant envy, and it is with I say, or not even envy, but like constant comparison to what other people are doing, and I'm observing them, and I mean Sherry talked about it that in that last video that I watched. I think you guys were in it, and she talked about how the narcissist is not even aware of like the real problem with the narcissist is that they're not even aware of themselves, like, or they don't know who they are. And like, I mean, I've always thought like there would be like narcissistic tendencies within myself, and or I'm I like that, like the borderline or whatever. Like what I'm trying to get at is like I don't know myself very well. I've looked in the mirror for the majority of my life, and I'm like, dude, you don't even know how to make like normal facial expressions. Like, like I'll make like a smiling face or like a sad face, and I'll be like, dude, that's pretty like effed up. Like I'll look at myself and I'll be telling myself that. Like I'll be like, you don't even,
So
but
there
like,
you go again, though. Like, or well, finish your.
but like that like I just am, and maybe it's because I don't have like strong eyebrows or something, but
Yeah.
I'm just making a joke, but it's I'd love to hear what you're about to say, because I think I'm completed with that thought.
Yeah, I've actually have been wanting to develop this idea further, like make a video about it. But I guess as far as I think I think all of this being alone in our own head, being disconnected, has to do with this Western modern idea of being an isolated individual. The idea that it's possible to just be you and yourself and a free agent in a world with no, I mean, it's very much more porous than that. And our thoughts and everything, it's more interlaced. But so, okay, for instance, so like having a, so yeah, so envy, like envy comes from fear, right? Or like when I'm envious of someone, it's always shown to
Insecurity.
me, when I think about it enough, or when I turn it over to my beloved enough, I always see that it's because like I'm afraid that I'm not good enough as I am, and like I need to be like that in order to be worth existing. But if I have enough of a supportive sense of love around me and self-image of myself in a loving way, then I'll see that no, um, I'm me like this, and this is okay, and I don't need to be that. And then sort of the pressure and fear goes away, and then I'm like, okay. And maybe I've also been trying to change the word envy or jealousy to myself into saying that I am like aspiring to be like that. Because aspiration is good and healthy. We're
Yeah.
aspiring. I'm trying to see if that will help me, because envy comes with a lot of like self-flagellation. I'm like, I'm so jealous, and then I'm like, that's bad. I shouldn't be jealous.
Yeah.
But you do notice when people are better, and that can be turned to a healthy way of like they inspire you. But it can be, it's out of fear, then it becomes envy and jealousy. but connected to that, or like more deep than that, or to get like a healthy self-image. I think a lot of the ways that people think about it are sort of weird, and almost they get almost schizophrenic. It becomes like you have to love yourself and you have to think about, because we're in this outer Western box of like
Yeah.
the individual being
Yeah.
this isolated individual with you and you and you in your head,
Yep.
and being slightly separated and weird in this weird
Mhm.
light retracted way. So it gets very very lonely. And how are you supposed to love yourself, and like you are already this hurting thing, and then you're like trying to, so like I think a way to think about it, I guess, which may seem from certain perspectives like crazy and split personality, but then I think that the alternative is even more so in practice. Like to look at yourself in the mirror and be thinking things at yourself, and to do most of the things that we do already anytime, self-monitoring and metacognition, etc. You're sort of half separated from yourself anyway. Even when you look back at your memories, like there's a certain amount of separation there.
Mhm.
So there, in order to know, there has to be like a self and an other. In order to know yourself, you have to sort of distance yourself from yourself and take the perspective of an other anyway. So if we were to be completely integrated, we would not, or in the moments when we are completely integrated and like in flow state, we are not conscious of ourselves at all. We're just like acting and like an animal or like a plant. And like that's great, but you can't always stay in that state. We're humans and we can do the metacognition thing, and I think it's okay. I think it's fun. But what am I saying? So I guess like recognizing that whenever you make a judgment on yourself, or like are looking at yourself in the mirror, you are separating from yourself. Therefore, you are sort of now split. There's a self and other kind of dynamic there. And like yeah, only another person or force can like know you or can know anybody, and that always implies a certain perspective of the other. Certain amount of bias, whether that's bias in a healthy living direction or bias in like a judging and condemning direction. So maybe instead of like, if you're judging yourself, and how do I judge myself in like that kind of dense, like weird, it is almost like, okay, who is telling you who you are? Are you listening to like the voice, say in Christian terms, of Satan the accuser, or like the voice of Christ or God or love, in order to figure out who you are, something like
My thought process is I'm thinking about differentiation and how that takes place between like a child, like in the developmental stages of a child. And I don't know all the psychological jargon, but I know that they had to differentiate themselves. And that also is like becoming an individual to a certain degree. But like, I don't know what differentiation, if there's the straight up overlap with individuation, but that I understand there's a selfishness involved in operating in that. What did you use? The individual, the isolated individual. But there's also like this importance of like fully differentiating yourself from other people, so that you have the freedom from basically using everyone else's perception of who you are to
right.
to understand who you are.
The thing is,
Like,
you have to use, yeah, that's
like,
another thing I was going to say. We internalize so many people, so your self-image is made up of like this fractal of all
yeah, Yeah, and that, I mean, I can 100% cop to that. Like, I don't think I'm fully differentiated. I mean, from everything, like, I interact with my mother, and it's like, dude, I'm definitely not fully differentiate. Like, she'll trigger me in 1,000 different dimensions. And like that. It's like, I wonder if there's like this weird like process where I've not, and so I'm constantly looking to, and like my identity is informed by all these other, like, I'm looking outside of myself. I'm not looking inside of myself to understand who I am. I'm constantly looking at everyone else to inform me who I am. And it's like, that's certainly not in, I mean, like, if we are made in the image of God, and like that is in the Imago Dei is like that, like I don't know, that inner turn, I think, is so important. And I don't have the language to talk about it, but like that's where, and the inner turn sounds selfish too. So I'm trying to figure out like how to have an internal life that's healthy, avoid like self-obsession and self-possession. Like,
This is what I think. I think it's simply true that we are defined by things outside of us. And I've read several books on this. Pierre Teilhard talks about this in The Divine Milieu and all of the, you can think of it as like threads. People from the earth, like our bodies are formed out of all this. We are dependent. Like, that's just a fact. You can never fully, I don't think you could ever fully differentiate yourself from the other determining you. Like, there has, but I do understand, and I guess what this idea of differentiation is going for is so that other people wouldn't like invade your personal space, impose on you, define who you are, bring out like the bad in you and like trigger you.
sure.
And which is like an unhealthy attachment.
Mm-hmm.
I think the danger is then being like, well, I shouldn't be attached at all, and I have to somehow find a way to like not define myself, because you are, like, the only way that we define ourselves is by this network of relationships, and
Mm-hmm.
this sort of, just
Sure.
make that a good one rather than
Yeah.
a bad one. For me, it comes from developing and growing and having a sort of buffer around you of others, of other perspectives and like presences, whether those be more spiritual and like more God, or in a perfect world, it would be, or like for a child who is raised properly, that would just be like their parents or something. But like, who could sort of be a space around you to like a healthy metacognition or a healthy perspective that you internalize, is it like this is who you are, and so that you feel that when you look in the mirror, you're looking at yourself through, as if like through the eyes of like a loving parent or like a loving spouse, or
Mm-hmm.
basically through God's eyes.
Yeah.
In a sense, that's not like self-determination, and that's some kind of unbiased thing that just comes out purely because like that really, I don't know, I don't think that's a thing, but it's like healthy and good, and it makes you feel like a whole person.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that is hard. And I wonder, like, I know that there's people that have been taught to do that, or maybe they've found a way to do that inside of themselves. And it's probably likely because they've immersed themselves in the Word of God that speaks that sort of, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, that's definitely difficult. It's, and I don't want to say like I'll never be able to see myself the way that God sees me, but it's like there's almost like this weird thing where it, like, it feels like that to a certain degree, you know, like I did. And it's, I don't know what to do about that. Like, I don't, like, it seems, because like I'm still stuck in this bag of flesh, you know, or whatever. And I know that that sounds that sounds probably horrible, and it's like a digression back to like the beginning, but like that's how that's what, you know, that's constantly you keep circling back, and then you know you the voice in your head that is the strongest isn't your better angel, but is the you know, the demon on your shoulder, you know, that's constantly whispering lies. and and so I guess there is a lot that needs to be taken into practice to hear that still small voice that speaks the truth, you know, versus all these loud voices that are speaking all these lies, you know. And
Yeah. It's almost more of like a feeling and a habit, like you're saying, and a practice, and does become very natural. I know that for me, I remember also when it was like first starting. So this part of it is like you're saying, sometimes a verse of scripture, like something that you know is true, just won't connect. It's like it's just you hear it, you repeat it, but it's dead, and like you know it's true, but it's not a feeling, and it's like, well, that has some power, but it's mostly just it's not as real as the feeling is of the dark voices. But I'm trying to think of practically how to, because I break things down, even quite high level spiritual things. I'll also simultaneously be breaking them down and treating them rather like a scientific experiment, and just
yeah.
weakness and a strength of mine. But
I appreciate it. It's fascinating to hear you talk, and I think it's been a super and very helpful conversation for me so far. And I'm sorry, Jason, I feel like you're you're sitting there in that.
No, I'm just I'm really interested. I think you guys are talking about well, I think you're exploring and talking about really important things, and I've been quiet because I'm just like just kind of listening and trying to process, because I don't know that I've thought about this stuff as much as you guys have. Um, I don't know, the things that were the thing that, and all these movies kept going through my head though when you guys were talking. You know, like this is probably not helpful at all. But even the mirror, I was thinking about for some reason when you mentioned the mirror, I and then kind of having this there's this weird, Abigail, you were saying it's almost like even though we're unaware of it, there's still like kind of this disassociation with ourselves, or something's going on there. And it made me think of when George McDonald, I think it's in Fantasties, and he says all mirrors are magic mirrors. And I was just like, it's such a good line, man. Such a good line. And it just made me think about frames too. He seems to describe the frames in a lot of his stories. And I feel like there's something very significant to that idea that I haven't thought about enough.
Yeah.
It's just the frame around the glass you're looking at yourself through.
Yeah, I mean, frames and mirrors and self images, like these are just parts of, you can't be unbiased, you can't be seeing just what is. Like you have to pick a story, you have to pick whose perspective are you going to take, which other perspective are you going to like take on yourself, whatever yourself, like
Yeah.
it's just what you choose. Like you have to choose the good one more and more.
Yeah.
A lot of it for me, and I'm like gonna make a series of, I think, videos about how my thoughts have changed. It's quite interesting and fun these days. And used to not be fun, but I think a lot of it is about, as you were saying, imagination and like making these things concrete and real more and more, and sort of feeding them, almost finding analogies, finding visual metaphors in a similar way to when people will say that like to reduce pain, if you picture it as like like a red ball of fire, the like cooling that, even something so simple as that can actually reduce your physical pain. Like the imagination is so powerful and it's so real. And if you believe in a spiritual world, it's really an interaction with that anyway. So like it's also not just your illusions making up of ways who loves you, even though no one really loves you and you're all alone, right? That's the nice thing about having a faith. You can believe that all of that is real, not just your technique to get over your brain chemicals going, which I find so ignominious and like there's no dignity to it. So I just have to make up anyway. What I'm trying to say is I guess think of, or you could think of this good voice. I mean, if you believe in the Christian idea of like the Holy Spirit, and that's sort of what the Holy Spirit does, is there in us and in our bodies and quickening us and being Christ in us. And so the Holy Spirit then, or like you could just use that term as this like little light sort of in your mind and your heart that is little, but you want to, as much as possible, have the habit of having a dialogue with that
Mm-hmm.
instead of just being like a conversation with yourself. I don't know how you're
Do you think that looks the same across the board for people?
absolutely not. I
That's what
everybody has such different things going on in their head.
I know, yeah, and I think like that's for me too. I will compare like other people's like
That's different.
experiences with like how they believe the Holy Spirit functions,
Oh no, it's
and then I'll like think about my own understanding, and I've nothing's ever really overlapped, or maybe it vaguely does. So I can like take what they're saying and be like, I think like maybe, but like it has been to the extent where like, I mean, I've questioned whether or not I'm even have the Spirit of Christ within me, because it's like like it seemed, and it was probably more deeply when I was involved with like the Pentecostal circles that I ran in earlier.
yeah, it's
Like
so
I
much
was,
pointless. Like
yeah, I could not like whatever I had. I mean, it left me feeling like whatever I had was completely insufficient, you know. And so but all that to say is like through this gentle process, like my imagination has been reawoken, but like it is, and I think I know that God's been speaking to me in like, but it's like God grant me the mercy to like see it, you know, because like I just don't, I'm still learning how to identify that, or if maybe identify is the wrong word, or like
I think identify and discern. Those were mostly the words that I was using at the beginning. So that was all it was.
yeah.
It was like this baby new thing in me that I had never, or like really I had. For me, it's more, instead of it just having been me talking, either to myself and back at myself, or just at a wall that was God that I could never hear back from.
Mm-hmm.
I started to develop a habit of like expressing a thought or like a worry or a fear or just my random dialogue about what I was doing during the day, and then believing that okay, this presence is with me and like is listening,
Yeah.
and opening myself up, or like just like listening and seeing what comes into my mind next, like in very quietness, and like what comes into my mind next, and if it seems good, or like if it seems like it's a good thing that's in love, then just assuming like okay, that's like from God, that's like from the good side, we're going with that. Down to that, and taking that as a response, as it were.
Yeah.
And that discernment became more strong until it was just an instinct, and until whether you want to say that I could discern God's responses as he inserted them into my, I mean, I don't know, it gets weird if he's trying to, I don't break it down theologically, I don't care. But like, whether you want to say I was better able to discern, or whether you want to say like that became a part of me, basically nowadays there's always, if I give it the space, there is like, say I'm scared, or I know I'm having an irrational reaction, or like I'm going into one of these dark trains of thought, or even just I have this random thing that like I want to share, or I'm just going about my day, I'm bored. If I will open myself up and listen, I can always feel like that other perspective, almost like somebody who's with me, or like a parent or somebody who's like watching over you.
Mm-hmm.
And like whether I translate that into words as a response, or it just becomes like
It's
thinking of
so bizarre because I feel like I spend my entire days in conversation with God.
okay, that's good.
Like there's just like this constant prayer
Yeah.
taking place. But it is like, it often feels like I'm the only one talking.
But do you
throughout
like
that prayer, but
put
like
space in to listen, or like to expect a response?
I don't think I do that very well. No, I don't think I do. I think I am like, unless you're gonna reveal yourself propositionally to me, like and out of left field, so you make it like absolutely 100% clear that you are speaking to me, I refuse to listen to,
Yeah.
it, and I will get, I think there's like a deep-seated anger that like God just won't make him, won't show his face to me in the ways that like I want him to, and so like and I'm chuckling, well, even though it's really not that funny, but like even that self-awareness is like that should at least open me up to the reality that God's not gonna reveal himself through these, especially my expectations, like the very fact that I would even impose those expectations on God. It's like he's probably just like laughing at me, like, dude, I'm constantly talking to you, but like
Read Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl by N.D. Wilson.
okay,
Good book.
I've heard the title of that.
But
Okay.
he basically says God speaks, and this is what my experience has been, and I don't fit it in entirely, like I don't fit it entirely into the Christian theological framework anymore, but it can be fit into there. But like to me, I don't know, a lot of our prayer life as Christians, I think, is hampered by us expecting God, thinking of God as like this
Yeah.
floating being out there who's
Yep.
thinking
Yeah.
one thing, and almost who's who's entirely separate from us. And then therefore it becomes a lot of, I did a video about this a while ago, like is this me, or like is this the Holy Spirit? Like is this me, or is that? And at a certain point, to me, what helped me to like build the discernment was just going for it. Be like, you know what? This sounds good, or like this is a coherence that I see between something that I see in life. Say you see a sign, like there's a piece of graffiti outside, for instance. This is more recent. There's a piece of graffiti outside on some building that says like you are not alone. I've seen that a couple of times and been comforted by it. However, there is this little bit of doubt. I'm like, was that from God, or is it just a coincidence? Like,
Yeah.
that's the wrong question. Obviously, and you could go through the logic if you want. God created this. He set up the situation. He knew you would see it. He knows how your brain is working and that you were going to see it. Therefore, basically, it's from God. Do you want him to like do it in a more miraculous way? Like, is one thing. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
And as you kind of go through that like train of logic and questioning, it becomes more of habit to just smoothly be like, oh, I see that, or oh, I think that, or like, oh, this good passage from a song came into my mind, or like this verse came into my mind, or like I can form words almost as if I was talking to myself, but like I know that this is quote unquote what I think that God would say to me if he were here to say, or just like anything like that you allow to surface in your mind, or like to form, and just like treat that as if, okay, that's the response, then go with it. and like that builds, and then it starts to feel less artificial and more like, okay,
Yeah.
the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's something extremely significant to the fact that you notice the sign. Like the fact that you give it attention, I think is something
Sure.
of God. Because
Yeah.
there's, again, even when I mentioned the little girl in her father's arms earlier, like
Sure.
probably 2 years ago, I would have just not thought anything of it. And it's like, to
Sure.
me, I think that's some of just, yeah, I don't know the right way to say it, I guess. The having, the noticing of things. And it's not like I'm purposely pulling meaning out of them or trying to twist things and make them
Right.
meaningful. It's just like,
We're
you just know.
makers. Like that's what we do. It's our job to interpret things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Huh.
This is an absolutely fascinating conversation to me because it's
Yeah.
just, this is so helpful. I don't think you guys even can probably fully reckon with like that. For me, I guess it's just like hearing you guys talk, or Abigail, you talk about this is so helpful because it's like it I don't know, it just like it gives language to something that I didn't have language for, and or I've tried talking about this maybe with other people, and or not even attempted to, or have, but it just didn't go where it needed to go, or what. I don't know how to explain it, like, because like what you're saying is like hearing you talk, like, because I do have these experiences, but like, yeah, I'm riddled with all these self-doubts, and I see I see the patterns like everywhere, and I also like you're saying, like I see the billboard, or I see or the interaction occurs with my neighbor, or the whatever little synchronicity happens over here, or maybe it's a major synchronicity and it's like very obvious, but like most of the time it's like these littler things, or like yeah, but like I constantly want to dismiss them. So like that's my default mode, and so like opening up my mind to like not operate outside of that default, I think is like really important.
There's this and let's quote George McDonald's again, of course. There's in Fantasties, there's this part where it's towards the end. Have you read it, Abigail?
no.
Well, I won't almost, I try not to spoil it, but there's this one part.
It's okay. I think his
where,
writing is too saccharine.
yeah, it's probably been quoted so many times, but there's this part where he says something about his consciousness enters this flower, because there's this girl and he's like, and then the flower, as soon as the flower began to wither, then I forsook it. And sometimes, I don't know, that past like little part of the book came to my head when you're talking about just seeing things. It's like you could be walking through all these flowers, and then it's just like that one, and you're like, why? Or there's just all of a sudden your attention focuses on one. And to me, that's sometimes some of it. And because I don't know why that happens, because it's like, because so many times I'm seeing and not seeing. Does that make sense? Like he who has eyes to see, yeah. And so it's like when I actually am seeing, it's like I kind of take that as I'll stop sometimes now and think there's God speaking to me, or like sometimes it says in scripture the angel who talks with me, or like Gabriel or something, like any of those things. Like it's just like this so that sometimes I also see now I've come to see that just like almost any I don't know that I should say any, but a lot of when I learn a truth, like an actual truth, I'm like, it's gotta be God, because I'm just so dense half the time. When things start clicking in my brain, I'm like, okay, God's doing something here, because this would not normally work. Or when I talk to Cal and actually understand him, I'm I'm keeping up. Oh my God, God's doing a miracle in my brain.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, oh, yeah.
No, he's just, he's, I don't know, but I don't know what's getting at. And the other thing too, like I don't know why I've always, and I don't know if this even relates at all, but it was just this image that came to my head. but because when I was talking to Craig one time, um, we were just talking about storytelling and everything, and then we were talking about how there's the astrologer and the prospector, and we are just saying, oh, it's kind of cool. You have one that like is always looking at the stars for truth, and the other one's like digging down in the earth. And I always feel like I'm digging down for some reason, like I'm trying to find gems and like little
Hmm.
nuggets of truth in everything, and I'll dig in all these. Like I'll listen to like weird podcasts about witches and stuff, and I'll get these little gems. And I'm like, oh, this is good. This is good truth. But it's like, to me, even that's like somehow discovering God or something in a way. But there's this one, it like made me think of this one story. There's some like Native American story, and it said that God, when he created the world, he everybody was scared of the mountains, and so like all the people were scared to go to the mountains. So in order to get the people to go to the mountains, God put all the gems and the precious stones in the mountains so they would go up there. But then the children wouldn't go, and God was like, well, I want the children to come, not just the other people. So he sent this strong wind, like you think of spirit or whatever, and it blew through the mountains and the caves, and then that gave birth to the butterflies. And so it's that like image that I often think of when I find this little nugget of truth. It like George MacDonald says, it like it's like the rock, the hard thing like breaks and has wings, and it's just I don't know. I don't know what I'm getting at. It's just a weird like pretty image that came to my head. And I was like when I find that nugget of truth, it almost takes this weird
Yeah.
heavenly form and imaginative form, and
Yeah.
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 But
I-
even you talked about, oh, sorry. Well, just the rock becoming something softer, like that. That's just interesting too, because it's Sophia, I guess.
Mhm.
yeah. Like even I don't know. I guess a lot of what makes this easier and easier is as you go to have more of a monistic view, or of like where instead of this gap between the natural and the supernatural and just coincidences versus synchronicity and me versus God, becomes more of everything is supernatural and it's all harmony and interaction and different levels,
Yeah.
but like there's no hard line between did I make this up or did God tell me this?
Yeah,
Because
it's
I
that.
have to
Well,
go all the way and talk myself through it. Like I'm really discouraged and I'm just talking to myself kind of out of habit. I'm like, it's okay, like it's gonna be okay. And then I'm half of me underneath is going, you're just making this up. And then I have to go like, okay, is
it's
it a
the
fact that like I am loved? Like is that fake? Am I just making that up, or am I giving voice in my head and translating what I know as like a reality that's around, and like have to go sometimes you have to go through it and like go down the whole rabbit hole and figure out where's your contradiction. That was a lot of the beginning. It was just like untangling all the little knots of lies. So many.
I'm curious, and I don't know exactly how to say this, but like for me, the idea of like divination and or theosis is so foreign to me until like the only way that I encountered it was through um like the new age. And so it was very much like, and my understanding was that was like the way that was achieved was also through like this weird death of the ego. So and I see there's a nuance there that doesn't necessarily occur within this Christian understanding of theosis, or even like a final participation or reconciliation that occurs as a telos. But I don't know. I'm still like there's a part of me that just constant. As soon as I hear those terms, I just want to reject them, because like me, the very idea that I could even conceive of myself as like divine and or participating in the divine or having fellowship in the triune God or participating in the Godhead or what have you, I see that as like like literally, I think I was taught theology that like that differentiation needs to occur between myself and uh and who God is. And so like having this idea of myself as God or participating in God's divine nature, which I think like those are two very different things. But maybe not. I don't know. I like that whole thing is just, it's been unapproachable territory for me theologically until just recently, and so it's like that's been wild to kind of like think through, but it also it just makes sense of so much for me. My not only my own struggles, it shines a light on that, but like also like but also there's hangups there because I feel like I want somebody to explain to me the difference between like the new age understanding of divination and maybe there is not. Like I think maybe I would have conversations with plenty of Christians that would say like with the reconciliation of all things and with a universal salvific like um love, like the new age is pursuing the exact same thing that I'm pursuing, but it's through Christianity. And there's this, you know what I'm trying to say, like with, and maybe you guys don't.
I
but
think so. I mean, there's like the idea of theosis, right? And divination and kind of becoming God. Yeah. This like it started to clear up for me when in the scriptures there's this part where Jesus says be perfect as God is perfect.
Hmm.
And like every time I was in church, like people would always there and I was in churches where it was
And they're like, he doesn't mean it like that.
yeah, that's what I'd always hear, because it would be like everything in scripture is true, like it was the infallible, that's what I grew up in. But then as soon as I got to that verse, it was like, well, he didn't mean perfect, he knew
Or also,
it was,
all of the universalist verses.
yeah. But if you look at Luke
Out of the
in
woodwork.
the Gospel of Luke, so he says it in the Gospel of Matthew, but in the Gospel of Luke he says the same thing, but he the same uh Sermon on the Mount, but then he says, be merciful as God in heaven is merciful. And that's when it started to click for me, because I was just like, I have this idea in my head of perfection as sinlessness or something, or and
Yeah.
it's like, and it's not, it's just mercy. It's just that's, and then that's when it started, I think, to click for me. And I'm like, you know, being like God is not far off. And then even what is it, Jacob and Esau, when Esau, like, so Jacob does all that bad shit to Esau, and like betrays him and everything, and then he's coming back across the river, and that's when he's wrestling with the angel. And then when he sees Esau runs up and hugs him and kisses his neck, and then Jacob says, I see your face like the face of God. And it's like that divine forgiveness, that spirit of forgiveness, that spirit of mercy and love is the face of God. And so I think that's when it started to click for me more. And I'm like, that is theosis, is becoming just, yeah, that same spirit, because he sits on the mercy seat. And if we're supposed to, uh, if you have the whole image of Mary and the Christ child sitting on her lap, it's like Mary's the seat, the mercy seat, sort of, and that's the church. It's supposed to be the mercy seat, and truth is
Ooh.
sitting on the mercy seat, sort of.
That's good. That's cool.
Yeah, that's when it started to make more sense for me. And then theosis, actually, I could be like, okay, this is actually something to pursue, I guess.
Yeah. The very fact that you said like this is not that far off. Or I just love that.
Yeah, it's not, because it's
Is
like
it-
it's right there. Like it has to be.
Yeah,
It
it's
has to be,
available.
because
It's
otherwise I can't
available.
have it.
It's available 24/7 every single moment. Like
Yeah.
it is constantly present. You have an opportunity to live into that mercy seat or what have you. Like you can sit in that chair or I mean, what language am I trying to use? I don't know, but like I'm just saying that it's like you can always love, and like you can you can always move into that open, loving, like you can always see other people as real as you are, or try to begin to do that. Like, I don't know.
Or just, to me, that starts with oh, allowing yourself to be loved yourself.
Sure.
For a lot of my life, I was trying so hard to follow the injunctions to love other people and to live for other people. And I had nothing myself. I was literally barely alive. And I was like completely empty. I had nothing. Like, how was I expected to be able to give? I think recently somebody expressed a very, what should be a Christian ethic, but unfortunately it was totally not. Because it's like toxic altruism.
Mm.
But that when people are filled up, they will naturally overflow, and people are flourishing, they will naturally be generous and good, and essentially in Christian terms have the fruit of the Spirit. And the key to that is simply opening yourself to receive God's life and building that communion between you yourself and like the forces and the voices and the patterns of good that are God's working together in the world. And through that, the fruit sort of will grow naturally. Like if you're trying to force it out of guilt, it hurts, and it hurts you. And I know that God has looked with pity and horror at most of my life. So, and it's just like, what are you trying to do, child? You're like, what, Dad? Come here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more like, I think just always the secret, or the thing that's helped me, has been finding terminology, reworking old terms that I'm misunderstanding, always changing things, like always questioning and getting to the root of things when I have the energy. You know, sometimes you don't, and that's fine. But, and then like letting, just like simplifying and simplifying and simplifying, and trying to find the simplest pattern, and like say, okay, like there was this concept of like, if you sin, or like if you feel like there's a separation, you have to like repent. And that eventually for me just became slowly simplified into like a mental gesture of just like flipping up whatever thought or whatever worry I was having, just like towards that. I think of it or felt it as a sort of light, just about like right here. But just like this, like just a mental, it was very simple and therefore easy, and therefore like any other process, like learning to ride a bicycle or whatever, you can learn healthy, whether you want to call it the good Christian life, or whether you want to call it like psychological healing, or the same thing. It's just building the good habits and letting that voice, however you, of God, of the Holy Spirit, of the become more coherent and become more solid, and like feeding that with all of the, I don't know, like if you hear a random like love song in the grocery store, just being aware, like, okay, that's love. If you go to the root of that, the concept of that is like the divine love, and that's something that's for me as well, and like that's how God feels about me. And
Wow. Yeah.
it feels silly, but then you start to internalize that, and it's
I like that. That's really good.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that before. Yeah.
yeah, because that's what happened with me. It's just very fast. I was just starving for everything and on Mexico overdrive brain. So I'm like grabbing everything from the environment, from inside my head, all the verses that I knew, which were suddenly coming alive in new contexts, all the books, all the childhood like characters that I loved. And I'm like, I can finally love God. Like I can finally feel that there's something between us, even if it's this feeble little thing. So I'm like, I'm like feeding this with everything I've got. And yeah, like I guess one half of that, the whole thoughts thing being the patterns, and in a more abstract, like the abstract patterns and noticing good things. as coming from God, or trusting that that's intentional and that's meaningful and it's for you, and you can like trust that and patterns. And then the other half being sort of an internal or maybe more verbal or like personal dialogue and conversation.
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me who, for me, so or a lot of the time, it was just like even just talking to myself, or you could think of it as translating what I am understanding from God, like into speech, into my language.
Ooh, yeah.
And even just that, even though it feels sometimes really dumb to be like encouraging myself, like, okay, like get up, good job. All right, go over to like the sink. Okay, we're gonna wash our hands. It's very healing, and I'm like, I really do need to be walked around like a little 3-year-old. Yeah, and I think that's been so healing, and
Wow.
just always having like that voice and guidance there.
Hmm.
We underestimate, I think, the amount that adults really grow up. I don't think nobody grows up. You just expect that suddenly you just like are. Nobody grows up. Nobody stops needing love and support all the time. You just don't get it anymore, and then you're dead inside.
That statement, I think that is like one of the
That
best
is a-
statements I've heard in a long time.
Yeah.
Nobody
that would
grows
hurt.
up.
Yeah, nobody does. Okay, for me, I have like a weird perspective on this because for me, it's quite opposite. Like, this is the first time that I've had anything like a classic childhood experience of being surrounded by support, of being surrounded by, I don't know, a presence of love that I could trust.
Hmm.
I have no memory of such a thing in my childhood. Not that my parents weren't there and not that they didn't pour themselves out for me, but that there was some kind of spiritual blockage from my earliest memories where I simply didn't receive that, was completely numb to it, and like didn't even know that was a thing. Like, not Verbeke talks about the 4 kinds of knowing. I had no experiential knowledge of that in any way. So
Wow.
like my childhood was already this. I was just, like so like this dead little thing. I didn't know it, so I was content, but totally cut off from everybody. And the only and so like I didn't have that pure joy, and I didn't have that like beautiful imagination. Well, a little bit, but in sort of a not in a personal way. I don't know. And I didn't have like the warmth, and just none of it. And
Mhm.
only as an adult have I, it's not even rediscovered, but just plain discovered that. And now, regardless of my age, so it's not like an age thing, I think it's just a human thing. So like regardless of my age now, I find myself like I can just be so mindlessly happy that like my whole brain goes empty and was like, leaf, pretty, or like something. And I'm just like, okay, so that's the experience that most people would say, oh, that is but being a child, and must grow up and come into the world and have jobs and taxes. I'm like, no, it's just because you don't have love anymore.
Yeah. Wow.
If you do have it, then there's no reason why you have to become a wisdomed sad adult. And if you're a child and you don't have it, you're not really a child even. It's like not to do with age. It's to do with love and support.
Yeah. It just makes me think of my little boy.
Yeah, but like I guess I imagine that you very naturally treat him with a lot of grace and with a lot of love and with very much care and tenderness. And you can
Yeah.
like internalize the way that you treat him and like feel yourself treated in that same way. Like it's that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think there's just there's so many barriers there. And so like, and I know where they came from, and I could have conversations about that, but I mean, that's for another time, I suppose. But yeah,
Yeah.
breaking those down is it's been a difficult process. And but I do feel like there are, you know, I could very well leave you guys with maybe the perception that I've never experienced love or something like that, you know, but I truly do, like, I have encountered God's love, and
Yeah.
like for me, it was early enough, like but it wasn't until I think I was probably like 17 or 18, and I read the Ragamuffin Gospel by Brennan Manning, and I got into a lot of like Brennan Manning's like this the relentless tenderness love of God, and he was a Franciscan monk for a while, and like um I don't know. Anyways, all that to say is he was just like, but there was even in the crowd of I had to almost like hide that book, you know, because it was like God loves you even when you're like in the gutter, you know, and like you're the drunk in the gutter, and God loves you, and like and he wrote Abba's Child. That's another really good book. But like, and then I went into Henry Nouwen and stuff like that, and like this was theology that was starting to begin to replace my POS theology, but like to pretend like that ever was absolved. Like I still know it's like every single day that's still tormenting me. So I might spend the rest of my life just like resisting that sort of thing. But you know, maybe that's too dismal of an outlook. But
Like, what if your child thought of himself that way?
yeah, exactly.
How horrified would you feel?
Yeah.
Like, what helps me sometimes when I'm really stuck is to think of somebody that I love. And I imagine, or rather, the way that I put it is, you know, God says to me, like, okay, what if X person was in the same room and expressed the feelings to you? And I like imagine myself in this situation. I can imagine it a little bit. And like, what if they said to you, Abby, I feel like I'm a failure, like, and I shouldn't exist. And I can't even get that far. I'm already like, no, like, it's just an instinct in me that, no, like, not that person. Like, I love that. And then you just sort of have to be able to, like, transfer that. But, like,
I'm sure that I've really understood what it might be like to love and be loved unconditionally
Mm.
until I met my son. And but that, I mean, that's crazy talk though. Like how can you go your whole life without, you know,
And I
know,
think you
getting that.
know perfection differently too. To me, that gets at that same idea. Because your son is, I would suggest he's probably spotless and blameless, at least to you.
Yeah.
Because someone else could look at him and see like, oh, there's might be this flaw or that flaw, but you're like, shut the hell up. Like,
yes,
my
yes.
son.
Yeah.
I love him through all that. Yeah.
That's, yeah.
And he's
But
perfect.
Yeah.
You guys have moved my mind in some really great directions tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, man. This has been, it's been a great conversation. It's gonna be fun watching back too, because the beginning of it, you're like running in from outside, going through your basement, like the cameras all over.
Dude,
It's great.
now the inside of my eyes bleeding because my
What?
son my son scratched me there. Yeah, like I've got blood on my finger right
Oh
now.
my
It's fine though.
goodness. Punish him. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
He's
joking.
got sharp little
How old is he, by the way?
phalanges, dude. He's 11. Well, he turned 11 months
Oh,
on Friday.
11 months. Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's coming up on his first birthday. He's the coolest little homie.
That's cool.
We rode bikes to the beach, and he sat in like this little thing. Like it was, I don't know. I haven't ridden a bike in like 3 years. It was pretty magical.
That's cool.
I don't know why I'm telling you guys this. It's getting to that.
Uh,
I just really appreciate you guys sharing time.
Yeah, it's been great.
Right.
And then I was gonna say too, like I hit record at the beginning of this, but I don't have to post any of it if unless you guys want me to, because I don't. It's kind of personal.
I really can't hide any of myself. Like you hide yourself for so long, and I remember
Yeah.
even having a conversation, like I'm just so sick of like holding myself up to the standard of doing everything like the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
I just,
helpful too.
I can't.
It's better to
but
be.
but that's up to you guys.
I'm totally cool with it. I was just checking with you guys because it's to me I think it's helpful to be an open book. Like I try to be the same way, but yeah.
I
But
figure if any of my like inner torments can help anyone else, what
Right?
happened, you know, like that's
why should
like,
only I get the benefit of my
yeah. I just can't,
well, I'll back you up. You're not crazy. I've seen the hag as well, so
yeah.
she's real. She's real. I've had some weird experiences too, man. We can get into those some other time, but just unexplainable stuff. But
Yeah, I'd like to
sure.
hear more of it. Like I know that like these stories can kind of take on like this.
it
Like,
takes
let's just talk about our weird experiences.
it takes the whole conversation to a weird different level if you want to swear over there and not like that. Yeah, it depends on we can maybe dedicate a conversation specifically to that strangeness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do like that.
Because this felt more important and meaningful and like we're really getting at something important. So I didn't want to derail it with some spooky story, some ghost story.
Yeah.
I think, like it's almost and this is what I wanted. Yeah, but like what is lacking, almost a synthesis between, say, what Christianity or a spiritual system has to offer, and then something like therapy. And I feel like what Christianity is lacking is sometimes the lack of the POS. Like that just derails the whole thing. And most of this powerful spirit in your mind is also telling you that you're a horrible sinner. So it's like, what's the point? But what Christianity is maybe lacking is practical advice about like, how do I hear the voice of God? How do I like talk to God? How do I tell whether it's the Holy Spirit or not? All these specific questions that you might have, like techniques for that, what that actually looks like on the ground, moment to moment. And I think what like therapy and more practical things that are actually giving you that, what those sometimes lack is like beauty or more meaning, and it almost just becomes exercises that you're doing with yourself, with your sad, lonely little self, to like pretend that let's try to like that you love yourself. How are you like just kind of, but I think you synthesize those two.
Yeah, and how are you supposed to figure out what love even means without having,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, I mean, all that stuff. I mean, I've been, and I know it gets way too particular to talk about the language, is like, analyzing your own inner voices and all that stuff and trying to figure out exactly the precise way in which God speaks to you. Maybe, it can be highly nuanced person to person, but at the same time, like, I didn't have any of that. Like nobody at any point, even in the Pentecostal circles that I was running with at one point, like coming out of a super conservative Christian background, but like there was no, I didn't get the the course in how to discern the voice of God at any point. And then what I was told didn't, I mean, I was very much expecting something.
It gets so weird in those circles too. I don't know half the time. Like I don't think they're far off or anything, because I know, I mean, I've met people that are very charismatic that get into prophecy that are just spot on, and then but then there's other people where, and a lot of times in those circles, you get into the stuff where like, especially with the relationship thing, it gets really weird. Like God told us to be together, and then they break up, and you're like, "Did he really? Did he really? Like what?
Yeah,
What was this? What was this that told? Are we getting like? Maybe it's the whole imagination versus fancy thing or something. I don't really know.
yeah,
That Sherry talks about sometimes. I think George MacDonald says something about that. Like so there's a difference between that and imagination and fancy or something. I guess
yeah,
it's just maybe semantics, but you probably know what I'm getting at.
yeah.
Yeah.
Abigail, I would love to hear more about your story. I'm sure I don't follow your channel currently, but I'll try to find you and listen to some videos because I'm sure there's stuff that you've revealed that I can read, or I mean, or I can watch.
Yeah, a lot of it's about this, and then I'm hopefully going to be my next lineup of videos is sort of about the way that my mind works these days, and just like all of the. This is sort of cool, but I have a lot of videos about this theme, about these kinds of themes, because
Yeah,
I was working through it. Yeah.
yeah. Do you have any content that just kind of like talks about your story and your background and who you are as a human being? I mean, or no, well, never mind.
You can sort of infer
Yeah,
a lot, but right now everything's too up in the air
sure.
for me to be able to give a version like just to the world at large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. And I don't, yeah, people's stories are also highly personal. And, I understand when people don't always want to share the ins and outs because I know there's, all of our stories are just far more complicated than anything that we've also,
To develop a healthy sense of privacy. I haven't
yeah,
had such a thing
Mhm.
before, so I try to like
yeah,
not
yeah,
tell everything. It's
yeah,
great. So yeah.
cool.
All right,
All right.
guys. Well, I'm probably up off here. Thanks so much for doing this. This has been
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really
yeah.
I'd be happy to talk again at any point, guys. I really do.
Same
love
here. Yeah.
talking to you guys.
yeah.
Anytime you guys want, just hit me up. I'm usually free every evening, but I think I'll probably be free earlier in afternoons this next week as well. So yeah, anytime you want. I'm always down for this.
Cool.
All right. You guys have a good night.
Thanks, Raphael. Bye.
Peace.
See ya.
Yeah.